Oh no. Oh no.
Welcome, folks. This is the November meeting of the St. Louis Linux Users Group. And we have a very special speaker tonight, Michael Lucas, who will tell us about TLS and its implications in today's network world. In the meantime, do we have any announcements or burning problems on anybody's mind that we can solve in 35 seconds?
I lost the buttons.
Who's got the button?
I don't know. I can't find the buttons. Where'd all the buttons go? Damn. Oh, heck.
And let's see, it looks like James didn't make it either. So I can't draft him as our official Linux group MC.
Well, let me go ahead and share the screen again and make sure to do a quick run through of the slides. Okay. This is the St. Louis Linux Users Group. Uh, well, uh, we started as a special interest group of the Unix group in St. Louis. And usually our meetings are 8 days after the St. Louis Unix Users Group general meeting. And that may be either the second or third Thursday of each month, depending on how the calendar falls out. St. Louis Linux Users Group is sponsored by the Linux group is sponsored by SLUG, and they pay any room fees when we go back to, if we ever go back to face-to-face meetings. They provide email and web servers for us. All the meetings are, however, free and open to the public, and there's no individual membership fee. The agenda here is from 6 to 6:30 is arrival time for testing your chat, your microphone, the sound, and the screen recording, and all that stuff. After that, we start with introductions, announcements, a call for help, archives. We point out about the archives in our calendar and our mailing list and the sponsored meetings. And then at 6:45, if the call for help doesn't go too long, the presentation topic will be thrown out there. After the meeting, further discussion is possible when on our mailing list or after the presenter gets started talking at us. The recorded chat and the slide works and video and everything go on our archives, usually within a few days. And our chairman is James Conroy, who's not here. Our normal MC is Gary Meyer, who's not here. Our host, Lee Lambert of Omnitech, thankfully he's here because he turned the machine on. And I'm here. I'm Stan Reichart. I do the production. I try to get a lot of things going here. And whoops, that's wrong. Our speaker is not Ken Johnson. I forgot to change that. We'll have to change it to whatever it is. Now, anyway, announcements. Daylight savings time ended Sunday. So if you're not here, you're probably late or early. I forget which it is. I can't figure it out. I've been going all week and I don't know what time it is. Lee, you want to talk about the volunteers needed for our upgrade?
Yeah. All of our services run on a cool little Bach VM that's been around. Debian has been around for Lordy, about 10 years now, and we're getting ready to pull the trigger on our 10 to 11 upgrade. But we've got a couple issues we need to work out. We're trying to figure out what to do with Mailman, if we can get the upgrade done now, or if we should punt. Since it is still supported in Debian 11. And if anybody would like to help out, it doesn't have to be you don't have to be very knowledgeable. Sometimes just an extra pair of eyes helps to do some research and put notes together. Or if you want to actually dig in under the covers and help out with the keyboard work, that's appreciated also. There's a list that we have called sysadmin. If you would like to be on it, just send email to editor@slug.org, and we will add your name to the list, and that's where we maintain all our discussions of the nitty-gritty technical work. It is not a public list. It is a private list, so it doesn't show up on the web page. Although if you know anything about Mailman, you can change the link on the end of the URL to sysadmin, and you can see it anyway. That's about it. Yeah, over to you, Stan.
Okay. 12 days from now, the fourth Tuesday is going to be the new Linux meeting. Sometimes it's 5 days after this meeting, but this month is going to be 12 days because the way calendar lines out. After that, the first Thursday of the following month is going to be the Slack meeting. Gary wanted to talk about Google.com purging accounts that we're not using the last 2 years. I think a lot of people have a Google email as a secondary email. If you haven't signed in the last 2 years, they're going to start purging those accounts.
Stan, one thing I just realized, if you have an Android phone, you have a Google email address because you have to have one to sign up for the Play Store. So don't forget about that. If you don't want that email to disappear, you better take action.
I would kind of think that if you use the darn thing every day,
But I mean, you may have gotten it to sign up for the Play Store, but never use it.
Oh,
If
okay.
you follow what I'm saying, there's no reason to use it if you're forced to get it to use your phone.
Yeah.
So if you're not using it, you could get hit with the inactivity. Is what I'm
Okay.
saying.
Well, all this technology is well beyond me. Okay. I guess, is that enough of the announcements? Yes.
I probably.
Okay. Is there maybe a call for help? You said 30 seconds? Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to be. I was being facetious, but
Okay.
we can't stop the war in Gaza, so let's keep it to something we might be able to address.
Okay. Before we get into our actual presentation, if there's no other things going on, I'd like to make sure I mentioned the presentation archives. There's our links on all of our web pages. And if not, you can do www.slug.org/resources/presentations, and it'll come up to that page. And that's where we record stuff or put the presentations, either the Zoom recordings or, if necessary, the backup recording that I do. And I think we've only, in the last 3 years, we only had to do that twice. Anyway, we also have a calendar. And in our calendar, our sponsored meetings are highlighted in red. And we might display that a little bit later. And then after that, we did mention the mailing list that we have. And those are available off of the web pages. And I wanted to mention all three of the sponsored special interest groups. This St. Louis Linux Users Group is one of them, where we do Linux-oriented presentations primarily. The Slack meeting is where we do configuration workshop, and it's hardware and software agnostic. We've even had Phil, one of our primary troubleshooters. I can remember he got a Linux box printer going for a guy at one of our meetings. Surprisingly, we can do a lot of help configuration-wise, even remotely, with just kind of talking people through the troubleshooting process. And then, of course, there's for my new Linux users group, which is a beginner workshop that we have. And before we go, well, I'd like to mention the topics here in this meeting are primarily focused on Linux, either personal or enterprise. And hopefully the presenter send any notes or PDFs and scripts and slide work to the editor at Slug for inclusion on our archives later on. And it'd be up to the presenter whether he wants the audience to hold questions to the end or not. And then after he's done, additional discussion is appropriate. We'll keep the meeting open until people get tired of looking at each other. Any other feedback? We're open to questions at this point about the general meeting. Okay, in that case, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Whoop. I don't know what happened here. Wrong button.
I'm sorry, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
How do you go about joining the organization?
Well, attending the meetings is essentially you're considered as a member, and you're considered as a member after attending two meetings in a calendar year. You can actually vote in our February elections. There's no fee involved, and so you show up again, you're a member.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I don't know what else to say about that. And
Stan, I got a couple comments.
okay,
There's also the mailing list. And pardon me, I just got on, so
well, I did that, Gary.
Okay.
You're day late, $1 short.
That's what okay. As long as it's already been covered. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. You might want to talk about you always want to talk about the calendar, though. Have you said anything about the calendar?
Let's see. Calendar. There is a thing called the Amazon AWS reInvent Conference. It's an annual thing. It is the last week of November. It's a Monday through Friday conference. I believe it's in Las Vegas. I haven't checked if you can attend online or if it's only physical, but it's on our calendar. So if you're interested in AWS, check it out and see how it suits you.
And I presume if you find out additional information, you'll put it on the calendar, right?
Yes.
Because we're constantly updating these things, and from minute to minute, it can be updated.
Another thing, totally different. Google announced last summer that inactive Google accounts, Gmail accounts, other accounts will be deleted as of December the 1st, which is 2 weeks away now. So if you think you have a bunch of old photographs that you've left archived somewhere out on Google, or other things that you've left on Google, old email, you've got 2 weeks. And if at that point Google decides your account's been inactive for too long, it can disappear. So that's mentioned in an email I sent last week to discuss. And so check out the details. I don't know all of Google's rules for what constitutes inactive. So
okay, that's a little bit more than we talked about a little bit earlier. You should have been here early, Gary.
I know I should have. If it wouldn't have been for those large fire trucks with the flashing lights that were blocking my way, I would have. So,
Just stop carrying matches, okay?
That's it. That's it. And lastly, just for the sake of history, on the calendar, I believe in about a week and a half, it's the 40th anniversary of Mac Auto buying timeshare. 40 years ago, timeshare was a big thing in not so much individual or private use of the internet, but just the beginning of getting corporations onto the internet, businesses. And Mac Auto buying them really put them kind of in a very visible position. So a little bit of St. Louis history there. So,
Okay.
and that's the calendar.
Is there some kind of thing coming up next week about some kind of bird family thing?
Gobble, gobble.
It happens in November.
Oh, yeah. I think it's the Tweety bird running away from the roadrunner running away from the coyote. No, it's not it either. I don't know. It's one of those feather stories, I think.
Okay. So happy Thanksgiving, everybody. We hope you have a pleasant and wonderful time with family and friends, and appreciate what we've got in this country. Okay.
And I'm looking forth a big thanks to Stan and Lee and a whole bunch of the other people who always really contribute to this group and help pull things together and get videos archived out there. So thank you all who've been very helpful for a long, long time. So.
Okay. I think it's time to introduce our main speaker. Do you remember who it is?
Let's see. If I could only remember Michael Lewis. Let's see.
Okay. Yeah.
But Michael is a noted author. Got a nice list of books out there. Noticed a number of them are BSD books, and and a number of our users have been saying that they'd love to hear more BSD talks, since we frequently have more Linux than we do BSD. But one of Michael's other pursuits has been this internet security thing, the transport layer security. And that's what he's here to talk about tonight. And we're really looking forward to it. A number of people who've told us that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Michael, there we
Thanks.
go.
Hello, can you still hear me?
Yes, we hear
Yes.
you now.
We're good.
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can share this. Can you see a big blue screen
We
with
see
a few words on it?
It's just kind of white on our end.
That's
transport
okay.
layer security in 2023.
Okay, and if Zoom says it's white, that's fine. Hi, folks. Thanks
Hello.
for having me.
Hello.
Hey, Mike.
I'm
Hey,
gonna ask you, if I was giving this talk in Meet, I would take questions whenever, but since we're online, I'm gonna ask you to hold them till the end, just because the format is a little clunkier than all of us being in a conference room.
Okay.
All right.
okay. I
So-
hope you numbered your slides.
Numbers are for the weak.
Okay.
So, who am I? Why did these people invite me? That stack was from 3 years ago, one copy of every edition of every book I've written.
Wow.
So, I've had to get a bookcase, but there's nothing quite like that picture. So, I have been using Unix since the late 80s, mostly a BSD guy. And I recently, for my sins, wrote a book about TLS. So, what I'm going to be talking about, what TLS is, what certificates are, the whole revocation and invalidation thing.
Said to be walking the westbound lanes of the Bay Bridge. This arrow highlights where it's all happening.
And traffic. Then CSRs, ACME, and related topics. And mostly we're going to be talking web servers. The tools I'm focusing on are OpenSSL or LibreSSL, which at the command line is indistinguishable for the most part. And these things were tested on CentOS, Debian, FreeBSD, and OpenBSD. So, transport layer security. If you've used Linux, if you've used any kind of Unix, if you have bought things on Amazon, you have seen that little lock icon in your browser. And it has said something about a secure website, and sysadmins, you've probably heard TLS this and that, and I'm going to start off by saying what it isn't. TLS does not add security, whatever that is. I have no idea what the word security means anymore, but TLS ain't it. It doesn't block intruders, it doesn't keep your credit card secret, and it doesn't stop password theft. These are all things that TLS can play a part in, but it doesn't really do that. TLS does one specific thing. It encrypts traffic between a client and a server. I'm sorry, it does two specific things. And it authoritatively identifies the server, the client, or perhaps both. That's it, nothing more. Now, TLS has been around for a while. Back in 1994, Netscape, the company that created the Mosaic web browser and really started the web as we know it today. They decided that they wanted e-commerce to be a thing, That meant that they had to secure traffic in transit. And the people in-house slammed together Secure Sockets Layer 1.0, thereby demonstrating an important lesson in cryptography. Any cryptographic protocol developed in-house will fail, and it will fail badly. And you'll notice a year later, they rushed SSL version 2 out the door, and then they hurried version 3 out. Basically patching holes as quickly as they were found, and they were found very quickly. Other companies became involved. Discussions about transport layer security got more inclusive. And in '99, TLS version 1, which you could say is the same as SSL version 4, but Microsoft categorically refused to sign off on any protocol named by Netscape. So fine, TLS it is. And then we've had these subsequent versions that have come more and more slowly. Now, more than one cryptographer told me that TLS 1.3 from 2018 was the first version that wasn't rushed and that they considered to have a proper cryptographic design. So I see a bunch of gray hair in the audience, which is grand. Any of you remember John Postel, one of the primordial internet architects? He was the guy who originally assigned IP addresses, and he kept the list in a paper notebook in his desk. When the US government tried to take over the root servers, he sent one email and stopped it cold. And he had this general rule for the early internet: be conservative in what you do, be liberal in what you accept from others. The idea being that we want to work together. We're going to do our best to follow the rules, but if someone else screws up their mail server, we'll try to work with it. And that sounds wonderful. You know, we all want to just get along and get on with our jobs and make things happen and get done with it. And that's great for, you know, web servers, HTTP 0.9 or whatever, database engines, older SMTP. So long as you don't allow spam, sure, fine, we'll get by. DNS is a little more iffy, but still, if you don't allow bad things to be done, we're okay. Older versions of TLS, we treat a little differently. They're actively bad, mainly for something called downgrade attacks. If I can convince a server to support a cryptographic method that an intruder can decrypt, then I'm deliberately weakening the connection. And this is applicable to all kinds of encryption, not just TLS. And the only real solution is to refuse to accept weak encryption. For example, suppose I get between Stan and Amazon, and I can convince Amazon to speak SSL version 3 to Stan. Well, I can capture his username, password, credit card numbers, or whatever, because SSL 3 is just busted. Or I could change your order in transit. I could order more things for you. Your account is basically mine. So what does disabling weak encryption mean? Well, all versions of TLS except 1.2 and 1.3 are known to be breakable. They are officially deprecated. Do not use them. Supporting them threatens your customer data, your business, everything, all the privacy. Now, In early 2021, the National Security Agency, you've probably heard of those people. If you're really good at math, they try to hire you. They strongly discourage many common TLS 1.2 settings. And the NSA has this distressing tendency to predict what's about to be broken by someone else. Unfortunately, there's no government standards compliant web browser that can speak just TLS 1.3, last I checked. And we can't really turn off TLS 1.2 on general internet sites. So at some point before long, you're going to see a TLS 1.3 or get out. So, encryption. TLS is built on encryption, public key encryption. You have your public key, you have your private key. And cryptography is a great hobby with huge amounts of math. And sysadmins love to argue about it, but now I'm a sysadmin, and at one point I held very strong opinions, but the truth is, I've been doing this for 30 years, and the truth is I don't really get to have an opinion. I could parrot someone else's opinion, and hopefully that person knows what they're doing. We have no choice but to trust actual cryptographers. There's one person who knows that I know who knows how it works on this call, but I'm not going to throw Bob under the bus. That would be rude. And we've got to trust the experts. This is why standards body like FIPS exist. FIPS moves very slow and clunky, but they're making an effort to give us someone to trust. In any case, regular sysadmins should not be hand-tuning ciphers and algorithms. We're just not equipped for it. A key part of real IT skill is admitting what you don't know and not engaging in occult gossip-based IT. And I bring this up because when I sent the TLS book out for review, half the feedback I got was people arguing about particular bits of cryptography without really having the background to do it. This misinformation is rife everywhere, and I've got to tell you, we need to trust the people who know the math. So the essentials are really, you've got to protect your private keys. Use OpenSSL's high cipher list. That includes what is safe today, and they will update that list when they need to. If you think your private key has been stolen, revoke the certificate, revoke the key, and start over. Another key point of encryption is who to trust. And this is the definitive problem of any encryption scheme. We basically have two competing models. One is called the Web of Trust, and this is used by PGP. And don't get me wrong, I would love for PGP to be a solid, usable thing, but it requires transitive trust and educated users. And the older I get, the more I think that if user education was gonna work, it would have worked by now. Certificate authorities are just easier for users. And TLS is about end user trust. So that's what TLS uses. A certificate authority is basically a single entity that you trust to verify the identities of people, hosts, and organizations.
I'll heckle you once, Michael.
Okay.
It's actually in Chrome, it's 131 entities, and in Mozilla, it's 144.
Okay, Bob would know. I'm not going to look. It would just make my night worse. So a certificate authority verifies what all these things are, and each of them has what they call a trust anchor certificate. This is a certificate that they issue and they say, we will sign the entities we verify with this. And the certificate authority issues certificates for hosts and users, declaring that they have audited this entity and verified the identity, and they issue a certificate signed with that. Now, client software comes with a bundle of these trust anchors, these ultimately trusted certificates. And there are 6 entities that provide bundles: Microsoft, Apple, Google, Mozilla, Adobe, and Oracle. Different software uses different trust anchor bundles, and not all certificate authorities are all in all trust bundles. If you piss off Oracle, they will drop your certificate and there's nothing you can do about it. Same for Microsoft and Google, etc. Each of these entities publishes requirements to be included. And they're all slightly different, of course. So what most of us use most of the time, because we have a bunch of Linux and Unix people here, and even a few BSD people that followed me in, is the OpenSSL Trust Bundle, the Mozilla bundle that most OpenSSL installs include. The OpenSSL people generally decided that Mozilla was the least troublesome of all of the bundles. The catch is, every operating system has its own way to manage these bundles. If you need to add a certificate, you can poke around the system and see, oh, here's a directory of certificates. Let me dump my certificate in there. A lot of sysadmins do this. But the problem is, every Linux distribution, BSDs, Unix, everyone has their own way to manage this, and an upgrade may overwrite the certificate you added. Now, if you're just testing, you can use OpenSSL's -CA file option to trust a specific cert for a specific command. Sometime for your own edification, grab one of these trust bundles and look at the contents. And my first thought upon doing this is, who are these people? Who is the Shanghai Electronic Certification Authority? All of these governments. Should I trust the US government? Should I trust China? Should someone in China trust the US government? My main IT involvement in Nigeria, sadly, has been email asking me for help getting money out of the country. Should I trust their government? This is, the thing here is, these entities need us to trust them. The question is, do we need to trust them? And this is the root question of the whole CA model. I'm not going to belabor it any further, but it's a great argument to have with a bunch of nerds in a bar. We just love this argument, it seems. Now, you could look at this and say, I'm going to strip down the Mozilla bundle, and I'm going to get only the certificate, the root certificates I really need and truly trust. It's educational, but not exactly useful. Everyone I know who's tried this has given up. Now, what is useful is, you could, in your organization, have some of your applications use a custom in-house trust bundle. Suppose you said that every certificate in your organization. The mail server certificate, the LDAP servers, everything would only use certificates signed by VeriSign. You could remove all the other certificates and leave just the VeriSign certificates, trust anchors. And if any certificate that violated your VeriSign only policy got installed, it wouldn't work. Now, I've never worked in a company that paranoid, but it can be done, and there are organizations that do that.
I have worked for a company that paranoid, several of them.
And for those who came in late, the guy who just interjected, Bob Beck, is he's my TLS expert on tap. He actually knows the math. So when we talk about CAs, you'll probably hear about this chain of trust, and you may have seen a diagram like this. The certificate authority has their certificate, and they sign your certificate. And a client looks at your certificate, sees that it's signed by the root, by the trust anchor, and boom, it trusts it. You know, I trust the certificate authority, so I'm going to trust things that it's signed. Great. That's a very early model. We evolved to something more like this. The true trust anchor is supposed to be very tightly protected. But they have to have people sign certificates. So what they do is they have the actual certificate stored in a vault underground, protected by rabid wombats. And they have that sign like a day-to-day certificate that signs actual clients. And that gets run on the servers and does the work, and they let the trusted people handle it. This protects the trust anchor's private key. Now, the thing in this kind of model is you, as the sysadmin configuring a web server, you must include the intermediate certificate in your server's configuration. The clients will not go out and fetch it. You must put that chain file on your server. Today, you'll see something that looks more like this. Multiple trust anchor certificates, signing multiple intermediates, signing your certificate. This is what we call resiliency or redundancy. If one of the root certificates is breached and revoked, or one of the intermediates, which is more likely to be breached and revoked, there's still a valid path. And so long as the software can find one path to one trusted root anchor, one trusted root certificate, everything is fine. You have to include both chain files when you do this. And this is where software goes wrong. A few years back, a trust anchor certificate expired. Everybody thought it would be fine because they signed their certificates with the newer one as well. Well, it turns out OpenSSL couldn't validate that other path, and everybody had to update their OpenSSL installs like immediately. And that seems bad, but it's worse than that. For example, where do new trust anchors come from? Often they're intermediate certificates that get promoted. And the software must be updated for this forever. And there's a question, yes, certificates do expire. They all have an expiration date. If you are doing anything with TLS, you must commit to updating your OpenSSL or LibreSSL or whatever SSL you're using forever. So these certificate things, what are they? Well, a certificate is an identity statement. We use X.509, which is the International Telecommunication Union's digital certificate standard. It's based on ASN1, the same standard used by SNMP and Telecom. And I'm not going to say that ASN1 is mind-meltingly horrible. But I will say that I wanted to write a book on TLS and a book on SNMP, and I wrote them one after the other so that I didn't have to load ASN1 into my brain twice. I could do it once and be done. So you don't really need to know ASN1, but at times you will see something like this long, horrible string of numbers and periods I've put here. And you've got to be able to go, aha, that's a bit of ASN1 that my software doesn't know. It's time to update. Update your software, see if it's picked up. And because we've never met a standard we didn't like, X509 also pillages the X500 directory standard that you might know from LDAP. And X500 gives information labels like these OU, OST, and so on. And each of those labels has a specific meaning and an ASN1 identifier. And a certificate expires. The ones that you get will usually expire every year or every 90 days. The trust anchors have a much longer lifetime, but their private keys are also guarded by rabid wombats. So what's in a certificate? Well, there's a few things in and around it. What most of you have probably done at some point is created a certificate signing request. This is a form that says, please sign me, and you send it to the certificate authority. Once you have the certificate, this is trash. It includes a public key, but it has a private key file that goes with it, that is its mate. That private key is the secret for your certificate. So long as you keep that secret, people will have a very hard time breaking things encrypted with your certificate. A certificate file itself is an extract of the information in the CSR that is signed by the CA. Then your server needs both your certificate and the private key. And yes, if the intruder captures that private key file, they can use the certificate and pretend to be you. Protect that private key. Now, the main purpose of a certificate, most of us see, is that we get that little lock icon in the browser that says, this is a secure web page. Again, I don't know what the word secure means. But certificate authorities provide 3 levels of validation. They can verify with domain validation. They verify that the entity requesting the certificate controls the host that the cert is for. If I want a certificate for my website, mwl.io, I must prove that I control the host, mwl.io. There, done. Organization validated verifies that the entity requesting the certificate belongs to the organization that controls the host the cert is for. For example, if I want a certificate for The Ford Motor Company, organization validated, would do the work to verify that I work for Ford. And they would reject the request because I don't. Extended validation is where they crawl into your personal life and verify that you are a particular legal entity. Now, the important things about these is one, each level is more expensive than the one before it. And two, all of them give you the special lock icon. And do you need these others? Well, are you a bank? Are you a financial institution? Are you subject to regulation that says you must do this? Other than that, no. Certificates are also signed with cryptographic algorithms. And we have two kinds that get used on certificates commonly today. RSA is old trusty. It's our friend. We use RSA encryption all over the place. The key length dictates the strength, and 2048 bits is the current standard. And once you start looking at longer key lengths, you hit points where, like, if every atom in the universe is a supercomputer and could brute force RSA computations, it would take longer than the projected heat death of the universe. So it could happen. It's not going to. ECDSA is the newest standard. It doesn't go by key length, but instead uses these things called named elliptic curves. It's about as strong as RSA, but it takes less computing to validate. Now, you can have dual sign certificates. Which should you use? For the most part, I tell people just use RSA unless you are targeting small systems. Like if you want to make a phone do a bunch of validation, use ECDSA. It'll keep your battery from being sucked dry. The common name is the most recognized part of a certificate. Everybody here has seen a common name, CN, in a certificate. Now, this could be an email address, a user ID, a first and last name, a serial number, anything like that. Yes, you can get a certificate for a particular serial number device. Now, up until the year 2000, CN was used to store host names. You might note that it's a wee bit past the year 2000 when this was deprecated, and yet we're still using it. It's wrong. Some software expects to find a host name there because that has kind of stuck around in people's brain, but we are actively working to exterminate this. And I believe web browsers are starting to no longer check that. Finally, a quarter century later. Why would they deprecate this? Well, a CN can have a maximum of 63 characters, and domain names can be longer than that. I have here, yes, I'm a nerd. I buy domain names for really bad reasons. But the domain, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means, .com, is real and live. And I wrote this book with The Princess Bride as a motif because I could. So that will not, dot, all of that will not fit in a CN. If you point your client at that and it's not checking for the modern standard, it'll break. So the replacement is called Server Alternative Names, or SAN, and we'll get to what that is. To look at a certificate, here we have OpenSSL, our first command. The sad thing is, if you run enough OpenSSL commands, they start to make sense. I don't recommend achieving that state. Anyway, the OpenSSL X509 command means we're going to work with X509 certificates. The in argument gives you what you're dumping in. The minus text says, show it to me in text form. And the no out means skip some of the cryptographic garbage. And this will spill out the certificate chain, the identified entities, any extensions that are on the certificate, and what have you. Now, these modern certificate host names are in this thing called Subject Alternative Names, SAN. And you can specifically pull those out of a certificate. You can specifically pull out any piece of information you want from a certificate in a single command. That's why OpenSSL has all of those arguments. You can do everything. So as you play with certificates, you may learn of this thing called a wildcard certificate. A certificate that's good for any host in a domain or a subdomain, like asterisk.mwl.io. I could get this one certificate and install it on all my servers and be done with this problem. Isn't that wonderful? Well, except that I have to share the private key across all of those machines. And one host gets compromised, everything is compromised. And to be blunt, intruders are sneakier than I am paranoid. I do my best, but there are a whole lot of hackers out there, a whole lot of worms, a whole lot of people trying to break into servers, and there's only one of me. The safest used for a wildcard. Sorry, we've hit cough season up here in Detroit. The safest use is to have on small auto-deployed systems, like, if I had API systems that my web server's called, I might try it there. So I've talked about the private key, but what happens if your private key is stolen? If you think someone got their hands on it? Well, the technical term for what you do is revoke the certificate. You contact your CA and you tell them, this key has been compromised, and they will flag it as revoked, and they will distribute that information to the clients. They are distributed by two different methods, the certificate revocation list and the online certificate status protocol. We'll talk about those, but now Firefox and Safari distribute a full list of revoked certificates to their clients. Chrome does editing. They only send clients the revocations that they consider important. Now, I run a small business. I actually have a web store where you can buy my ebooks direct from me. Nothing fancy. So I revoked my certificate on that site at one point. And then I checked to see who showed that certificate as revoked. Firefox and Safari caught on within about a day. Chrome users never saw it. So I can't really recommend Chrome for trust. If your business is small, or if you're in a country that Google just doesn't pay a lot of attention to, you've got to assume that Chrome users will never see your revocations. And that's just how it is. So the first method, these certificate revocation lists. The CA has a file that contains serial numbers of all the unexpired but revoked certificates. Now, these files might be a megabyte, they could be 75 megabytes, which is not a huge amount if you're on a cable modem. But a lot of people are not. Clients cache these for a while, usually 24 hours. And this doesn't scale well. Clients have to download the CA of every certificate authority that has signed any certificate they validated. This is a lot of stuff being dragged around that never really gets used. That's why we came up with this online certificate status protocol. You can check when you validate a certificate, you can poke the certificate authority and say, hey, is this still valid? And the certificate authority turns around and says, yes, here is your digitally signed notification that, yes, this is still valid. And you can cache this for 7 days. So if someone compromises your private key immediately after a client does that check, they could fake being you for 7 days. That's a lot better than never. Now the server can make those queries for you. Attach that digitally signed verification to the certificate, and when your client makes its TLS request, it returns that signed OCSP query with the certificate. It's called stapling. And the client skip verifying OCSP with the CA on a stapled certificate. Now, servers can also, when you first contact them, set this must staple flag that says, either I give you a stapled cert or the certificate is invalid. In general, Chrome's derivatives, like Safari, you must enable OCSP. And as far as the nifty must staple thing, Chrome ignores it. So, if revocations are being ignored, what do we do now? Well, first thing you do is never let your private key be stolen. However, we all know that prevention eventually fails. So, other things that can happen, short-lived certificates. If you're a bank, you may look at getting name constraint certificate. There's something called DANE, where you can verify a certificate fingerprint over DNSSEC, and that's very popular in the email world. You can get a really big stick and beat on vendors who ignore revocations. You can deploy browsers or forks of browsers that enable OCSP out of the box. The trick is finding one of those that doesn't also say mine cryptocurrency in the background. You can also, if you have the kind of organization that uses real hardware, you can use a hardware security module for your private key. Okay. So after all those warnings and caveats, suppose you still want a certificate. Well, you need a certificate signing request. That the CSR contains all the information that the CA must validate. Now, there's a friendly OpenSSL dialog that gives you a CSR. That dialog puts the host name in the CN. It supports only one host name. We've been trying to kill this for a quarter of a century. Please don't use it. Having said that, many CAs know perfectly well about this dialog, and they will copy your CN into a subject alternative name for you. So, but still, this is obsolete. We have config files, we have command line options. Skip that dialog. And once you figure out how to make a CSR, when your certificate expires, it would be technically possible to use the previous year's CSR. I know a lot of people who say, oh, do that, that's fine. And no, it technically possible, horrible practice. The CSR is tied to a specific private key. Are you absolutely certain that that key is still secure? Have standards changed? CSRs are free. Keys are free. Creating CSRs can be scripted. Make a new private key. Make a new CSR. The information in your CSR, well, the important thing is to only include the information you must validate in that CSR. A DV cert, domain validated, they're verifying that you control the host. Only thing you need is the host name. Don't bother filling out your organization name or your state or any of that. Nobody cares. It shouldn't be in the cert anyway. Just the domain. The more heavily checked certificates, you need some organization information in there. And that includes things like the C represents the very specific ISO 3166 country code. Do not use the wrong country code. ST is your state, locality, your company name, all of that. I'm going to suggest that you gather all of the official names before you start scripting. Maybe everybody that you work with knows that the company is called the Pit of Despair. We've all worked there, but if the formal name of your company is the Pit of Despair, LLC, that request will be rejected. Get the actual name first. So if we're looking at config files to make these with, you may as well set up a config file. You can reuse it. And this, you set some key names. You set a couple of options that are standard across CSRs. Here, I've put in CN for common name because some software chokes on it. But down below, alt names. I've filled in the names that I want this host to use. To use the file, you run this command, this OpenSSL command, a request -new key, RSA, -config in the config file, -out where you want the CSR to go. And it just happens, none of this prompts. Now, every time I've created a CSR, I immediately wonder if I did it correctly. Well, there's an OpenSSL command to read the request and print out what was in it. You can also generate CSRs without config files at all. Here is a command line that includes all of those alt names and everything. You take the CSR that's generated, you send it to your certificate authority, along with a check for whatever outrageous fee they desire. And they send you back a certificate. Life is good. Here's one nifty thing I learned. You take your certificate, you put it in production, everybody gets the lock icon, everybody's happy. But best practice is to have a new CSR and a new private key every year. How do you tell if one of the sysadmins in your organization got lazy and decided that they just reuse the same private key? Well, you can tell that. You can also, if you had some file confusion and you've mixed up the private keys and the certificates and you're not sure which goes to which, well, each key pair of private and public keys have a modulus, which is a shared numerical value unique to the key. And there are OpenSSL commands that you run to match things together. If a key and a certificate have the same modulus, they go together. And so that's the basic of how certificates work. Let's talk a bit about how most people use them today. If we were in a room, I would ask people to raise their hands if they have used Acme, but I'm going to assume that most of you haven't. So every sysadmin I know griped for decades that we filled out a form, we generated a number, we sent it off to a certificate authority with a check for $100. Back when $100 was real money. And they would run a script and take the money and mail us a file. That's all they did. This should be automatable, and this shouldn't cost nearly so much. Well, over time, certificate prices dropped. We had $50 certs and $10 certs, and now, thanks to this thing called Acme, certificates are free. The Internet Security Research Group founded a free CA called Let's Encrypt, and it provides free 90 days domain validated X509 certificates to anyone who asks. So for most of us who are not banks or financial institutions or bound by government regulations that say otherwise, this is really the way to go. And here's basically how Acme works for certificates. The client says, I'd like a certificate for the host. And the CA says, well, if you control the host, make this change on the host. The client says, I've changed the host. The CA checks and says, why, yes, you do control it. Send me your CSR. Client sends it in. CA sends back a signed certificate. This is all automatic. And this can be done in a few different ways. There are 3 common challenges. One is the HTTP challenge, which is put a file, name this, containing that in this folder on the website of that host. There's the DNS challenge, which says make a change to the zone. And there's ALPN, which says make this change in your TLS protocol. Well, which should you use is the obvious question. We'll get to questions at the end. On a single server, like if I'm running a web server, HTTP is a no-brainer. Most of us use that. If you need a wildcard certificate, most of the free CAs only allow DNS challenges. If you are using load balancers, pools, clustering, all of this stuff, then look into ALPN. About 2/3 of the way through your certificate's lifetime, you start renewing it. This gives you 30 days, about 4 weeks to solve transient issues, temporary outages, name server failures, whatever. I just schedule mine in cron, and most clients handle this. And yes, to make Acme work, you need a client. Here's the official Let's Encrypt client in Python. If you run Apache, ModMD inside Apache just does Acme for you. It reads the information out of your config and does it. OpenBSD has this lovely Acme client that just poof works. It's one of the simplest out there. For you Linux folks, there's a Docker container that will just handle Acme for you. I'm iffy on Docker containers just because so many people deploy them without knowing what's inside. But I don't have to fix it, so do what you like. My favorite cross-platform client is Dehydrated. It runs on a Raspberry Pi without trouble. So you can get certificates, you can renew them, you can protect your traffic in transit. I'm going to touch at the end here on just a few details of TLS that most people don't know exist. Start by getting all of your servers up to speaking only TLS 1.2 or 1.3. Then look at these. There is this thing called HTTP Strict Transport Security, HSTS. It's an HTTP header that says, this website only serves pages over TLS. Please cache this. The client, when it makes a request, transparently rewrites any HTTP requests into HTTPS. It refuses HTTP from the host name. And it's web only. Now you have to be a little careful when you are deploying HSTS on a long-running website. I deployed it on one of mine. I set a 1-year timeout. Parts of the website were not available over HTTPS. And I quickly learned which parts those were. And had to fix that. If it's a brand new site, to give HSTS a try right out of the box, turn it on, set it up correctly from the beginning. So when I say get all your servers up to newer TLS versions, how do you know? Well, you test your server. The first time, I would tell you to go look at SSLLabs.com. And this looks for bad TLS versions, broken ciphers, general misconfiguration. It only works on public websites. If you work for an organization that actually has intrusion detection, the SSL Labs TLS tests are indistinguishable from an intruder probing your website to see what your TLS is set up like, because they're the exact same questions. So talk to your security team before giving them some red flags. It will save you an apology later. Ask me how I know. If you want to do the same test yourself without a remote website, testssl.sh does it for you. Running your own CA. Yes, you could run a certificate authority. Many companies do that. It's just a bunch of scripts on signing certificates. Now, OpenSSL includes a small certificate authority as a bunch of scripts. And they clearly label this as demonstration. Do not use in production. Never exposed to the internet. It's a great thing to learn for like inside your basement lab, but many people see those warnings and decide they don't really matter. They do matter. Do not use OpenSSL's demonstration CA. People have written software that is meant to be exposed to the internet, that is meant to be usable on a long-term basis. Get an actual package. All these programs have books. If you need a CA, read them. Otherwise, if it's in your basement, I would recommend building that small demo CA the same way I would recommend making a PC and building your own firewall. Do it once, live with it a while to see how it works. You will learn a huge amount. Some of that will be stuff you wish you didn't know. But, you know, that's this whole business. One last thing, if any of you are in large organizations, there's this thing coming called name constraint CAs. A big company can buy a certificate that allows them to sign their own certs. Now, maybe one of these, well, last time I checked, these were about $10,000. For some organizations that are operating under, those same regulations and guidelines, it might be cheaper for them to buy a named constraint CA and sign their own certificates. I've talked to people that's true for. And one of the nice things is that you can set expiration dates, expiration times. If you have proper automation, you could say all of our certificates expire in 12 hours. We generate new private keys for every new certificate. If someone steals a private key, its use is very limited and its lifespan is very short. Now, I expect these to get cheaper. Doing this sort of thing requires reliable automation. You need Ansible or Puppet, something like that, or don't bother. But over time, these are going to get cheaper and are going to get more and more in reach of smaller and smaller organizations. So that's really it. If you want a huge amount of painful detail, including the world's most nightmarish OpenSSL command, thank you, Bob, you can grab the book TLS Mastery. And if not, yeah, Grant mentions that OpenSSL can create constrained certs with config files. Yes, but they won't be trusted, except perhaps by your basement CA. So I am going to stop sharing here. And Josh G has had his hands up. So I'm going to ask him what his question is.
I actually don't have a question, Mike. I was one of the Acme users. I raised my hand and forgot.
Okay, fair. I do miss meetings where I can look out over the class and see if you're all either stunned into incomprehension or bored beyond words.
Networking?
So I hope some of that is useful, and please throw out your questions.
Share that screen.
Where are the rats, Thumb Beast?
The rats are in the basement, or the rats are on the main floor. I'm in the attic. Well, thank you, Lee.
You're welcome.
And
I just have to really respect the ability to not take sides between the BSD versus Linux community there. I mean, you serve them both very, very well.
well, thank you. The truth is, I waited for 8 years to use the Scream to parody for art. And at TLS, everybody screams.
I'll throw out there when Michael said that the OpenSSL commands start to make sense. They actually do. I tech reviewed his book and reread it after he published it, and dealing with SSL got easier. What particularly got easier was troubleshooting, or what is this cert? What names does it have? What dates does it have? Oh God, I've got a whole bunch of certs weirdly named. I can see the details.
You know, they have a name for this phenomenon where it starts to make sense and it works better. It's called they have a name for this. It's called Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah.
I'll just point out, by the way, that Michael said you get that magic lock icon. Those people in Chrome are changing that. The lock icon's going away in new Chrome. Actually, and the main reason, reason I want to bring it up is the main reason they are is exactly what Michael said. He doesn't understand what security means. And the lock icon, people every time they looked at it, people would say, well, that means it's secure. What does that mean? We don't know. And Michael's a pretty smart guy, and even he doesn't know. So they've just flipped it around. It now looks normal if you have HTTPS, and it has a nice little red, this is bad if you have HTTP.
That's not bad. Oh, Stan has his hand up like a gentleman.
Early on, you said something on one of the slides that said, I didn't see the whole phrase, high list. What's a high list? What's it?
OpenSSL has the ability to specify which ciphers you want to use. What algorithms do you want your site to support? And you can go in and you can name ciphers. Like, you know, the OpenBSD folks used to use Blowfish. That must be a good algorithm. So I'm going to put that on my list. Us sysadmins should really not be making that call because we don't know what the heck we're doing. But OpenSSL, each release has this macro called high in all capital letters. And you can use that in the place of a list of ciphers. And it says, use only the algorithms that this release of OpenSSL thinks are okay.
Thank you. Appreciate the definitions
Sure.
and explanation.
I don't want to know. I really don't. This.
Yeah.
Michael, the chat, the Zoom chat has like about 24 entries in it.
Oh God, yeah, I saw it out of the corner of my eye, but
so maybe just I mean, it's probably easy for you to read, I hope. But the first one in there, your certificates expire.
Yes. Yeah, I did touch on that in the talk.
And
I will be sharing PDFs of the slide. Oh, and the meeting's being recorded. Excellent. If it's okay with you, I will put the link on my webpage so people can see the talk.
sure, excellent.
Excellent.
Does the
In the
alpaca
past,
attack come into play more with wildcard certs? Well, Bob would know.
as a point of reference or understanding, in the past we have actually taken down a recording because the speaker didn't feel it was of good enough quality. So you know, I mean, but this
Well,
has been excellent discussion and presentation.
well, thank you. I mean, if the recording turns out staticky because Zoom is having a bad night, I just label the link as, Zoom is full of crap, and they did their best, and here we are.
Like a true essay.
Yeah, everybody on this call is doing the best they can with what they have and knows that this business is terrible. Computers were a mistake. It's a miracle that anything works. And one day, some dude who is maintaining a critical project that nobody quite realized about is going to die, and the entire internet will crash. I just hope to have retired before then.
We should never have trust
Like
in
an
silicon.
opportunity, a lot of consulting money.
Yeah. So, are the Acme CA servers in the trust? Yes, the Acme CAs are trusted by everyone, by all of the major bundles.
That wasn't always true, but it has been for a number of years now.
Yes.
and is it true?
I replace certificates? Oh God, no. So the Acme solution is great for internal devices. Yes, you can use Acme for internal devices. There's a couple ways. I know someone who set up a public web server with all of his internal device names and copies that into his network. And however, the DNS-based challenge is for exactly that use case. The catch is you have to know DNS, which is increasingly a dark art, I'm afraid.
Know a guy who wrote a book.
No, you know a guy who wrote a very narrowly specific book on a teeny use case.
I'll jump in on your use the DNS challenge. That's a good one for the solution, where you then want to identify your internal sites that are trusted by a public CA. If you are the kind of company that wants to put a private CA into your company's clients so that they are deliberately not trusted by the public web, then your only choice, if you want to automate and use something like Acme, is to run your own CA with Acme in front of it. I did post a link in the chat to GitHub to something called Boulder. Boulder is the software that Let's Encrypt uses. So they have released their software stack.
And you might know, Acme, the obvious reference, of course, is Wile E. Coyote. Getting crushed by his own schemes. And I'm not saying that's what Let's Encrypt had in mind, but naming their software Boulder does rather hint that
that is why it is
exactly what they're doing.
I've run into some weird issues using DNS authentication for internal things. Like, you can get certs from Let's Encrypt or whomever for your DRAC for your server. The problem is rotating that certificate on that internal thing becomes problematic, and something that was bought on a grant 8 years ago and still has another 9 years of service life on it does not know how to do an Acme client. So rolling those certs every 90, 80 days, however often, becomes a problem. So yes, you can get internals through Let's Encrypt and the likes.
Well,
you're gonna regret it.
Deploying certificates remain as a problem for the sysadmin. No, the whole point of Acme being, or it's the whole point of Acme providing 90-day certs is to force you to automate. A job that you do once a year.
It's actually not so much to force you to automate. It's to get rid of all certificate revocation mechanisms eventually, because they're all terrible. And they don't work. And people think they do and they don't.
I hope I made that clear that you're basically doomed. But as a sysadmin, a job that you do once a year is easy to neglect. It's easy to think, oh, I don't need to script that. I'll just look it up again next year, and then you scramble to find the information. And no, with an Acme client, it just happens.
And Acme clients have improved since Let's Encrypt's original release.
Oh God, yes. I would there is nothing wrong with CertBot. I would not encourage you to investigate it, because you do not need a giant Python client for something that's implemented in a couple hundred lines of shell by other clients.
Well, what's a good option to CertBot for using Let's Encrypt?
Well, the one I recommend for my favorite overall is OpenBSD's Acme client, because it's just poof, done. If you're running Apache, they have a ModMD that goes directly in Apache and does it for you. That's lovely. If you need to generate cert files through an add-on client, I prefer Dehydrated. I know a bunch of people like Acme.sh, but the Acme.sh author sometimes changes things behind the scene without bothering to tell people. Like he switched at one point from Let's Encrypt to a different free CA, which there may be solid technical reasons for it, but tell me. That's a kind of big change. If I was using something like CAA records that said, I only issue certificates from this CA. I only use certificates issued by this CA. That would bite me.
Michael, I'm a Acme-client user on OpenBSD, and you mentioned something in your talk today I had not considered. So I've been a Let's Encrypt user since their incept and public announcements, and I moved over to Acme client once it was available, and I love it, except that I don't think it will do what you have asked me to do of it, which is to change my private key annually. I have never changed it.
Well,
you're correct. Bug in Acme client.
I'm sorry, Bob?
You're correct. It's a bug in Acme client. It won't do it unless you go change it yourself.
Right. It's not a bug. It's just it's a missing feature that I am now responsible for.
Yeah, it should just do it, and it doesn't.
Well,
thanks.
I guess this is the point where we all look at Bob, meaningfully. That's another place where Zoom fails over us all being in the same room, because Bob could like feel the glare. So you still handle that, please. Anything else?
Did you read that draft I sent you so you can start writing the next TLS book where everything changes?
I hate you. I
Michael,
hate you
once you
and
figure
all
it-
that you stand for.
Once you figure everything out and write version 2 of the book, let me know.
Yeah. Don't worry, you'll hear the scream.
The scream was pretty good when I sent him the thing to get him to make an Acme request to Let's Encrypt with an over 64 character CN. It doesn't work. It didn't used to. I think they may have fixed it.
Yeah. So, yeah, and yes, as someone commented, yes, someone at Microsoft every year forgets to renew a X509 cert.
No, that's just
Every year.
every company.
Every big company,
every
someone does
company every year forgets, and something breaks, and somebody goes, "Oh yeah, we forgot about that."
Yep.
Broadening out, broadening out from the technical to somewhat to the personal. I'm taking it that your primary job in life is an author.
Yeah.
And I always am fascinated when there's an author who obviously has a great deal of technical experience. So have you previously been less of an author and more of a line employee for some large company or organization?
I was a full-time sysadmin until 2015.
Okay.
The company, well, I spent decades climbing the ladder, like you're supposed to do. And at one point, I was Western Hemisphere network lead for an automotive supplier, GKN. And you know, in our culture, that's what you're supposed to do. But I realized that I hated the job. I loved playing with the tech, but everything to do with the actual job was stupid. The manufacturing system was controlled by a system here in Detroit. And I got a memo discussing the new plant that was going in Uruguay that was going to need to telnet over our private network to Detroit and work the menu system. And they had priced, the local plant manager had priced a fiber line, a T1, and a 56K line. This is very expensive in Uruguay. All of it. So I came back and said, well, there is this thing called the speed of light. The 56K copper line is not going to do it. Sorry, it was not T1. It was the 2 megabit over some fiber-like thing. I said, you're going to have to at least do the 2 megabit. And I walked away, having given the benefit of my experience. 6 months later, they came back and said, the 56K line doesn't work. And you will make it work because I am a vice president. I said, thank you very much. And I turned in my notice.
Man of his
And a
word.
friend of mine had been offering to hire me for years. He said, when you come to your senses, we'll only pay you half as much. But I promised to not be stupid.
And they promised to actually listen to what you said, right?
Well, the boss was a nerd. And yes, I took the 50% pay cut and never felt better. When that company folded in 2015, I had to decide, am I going back to corporate stupidity, or am I too old for that shit? Because I had an alternative, the books were selling. And yes, I could, any day I don't feel like writing, I tell myself that's fine. I know recruiters in this business. I could pick up a phone, and by 3 o'clock that afternoon, I could be on a conference call with a stupid customer solving a stupid problem over stupid matters. And suddenly I'm writing. Oh, the words are coming.
Well, Michael, I must say, since we're getting a little afield from the TLS matter,
That's fine.
I have been reading your books for, God, what, probably close to 15 years, and I've enjoyed every one of them. And I am very happy that you found a sane pursuit of happiness with Theo and his crowd, instead of the corporate, in addition to the corporate world.
Michael, you have not given enough credit for yourself for some of the ways you write your books, in that you lab things, you find bugs, you submit bugs, you see the bugs patched, you talk about it in your book. You do a lot that is way more than just authoring.
Well, here's the thing. It's my job to speak the truth. I do not write a book to deliver a sunshine enema. If, I'm going to pick on Bob because he's here. If I report an OpenSSL bug to Bob, sorry, if I report a Liberate TLS bug to Bob.
No, actually, no, because that's the portable version. I won't care about that either.
If I report
along, Bob.
a TLS bug in OpenBSD to Bob, and he ignores it, that's important for people to know. That how does the software author respond to bugs? Now, I try to choose to only write about projects and that actually respond to legit, well-reported bugs. There's a tool I'm using for the mail book I'm writing right now. Yeah, Bob, I know.
I'm stopping my video, so I stop laughing.
Yep, and it's the best tool I've found for the job, and it's been abandoned since 2015. But it still does the work. So I'm having to put some caveats in it. And what I'm really hoping, and I post on social media now and then, if someone wanted to make the world a better place, they could update this tool, because it would be straightforward, and nobody has fallen for it yet. But yeah, that's important. I am not going to recommend you do. The only reason I'm recommending that tool is because it's a shell script. And a sysadmin can look at a shell script and easily remove things that are not relevant anymore. If you have a list of domain names, and one of them is, say, twitter.com, I don't know that we're getting mail from Twitter anymore. I think it's all x.com now. So, yeah, you gotta know what you're getting into. And everything in computing may be horrible, but I'd like to offer the least awful path. So thank you, Grant, but it's really the bare minimum that should be done.
I wish more people would.
Yeah, well, you know.
Like maybe Bob would fix some bugs.
Well, in Bob's defense, I reported a bug to him, and he went, "Oh shit, it's a bug." And next snapshot, it wasn't a bug anymore. I mean, most developers love legit bug reports. Oh, what was it? Oh, yes. If I did OCSP on one virtual host, but not the others on that web server, TLS, the X509 certificates on those other sites choked and died. And yeah, Bob fixed it. Yeah, developers love real bug reports, especially ones that don't start with "Dear idiot." So yeah, we've gone afield, but anything else, whatever.
When's TLS Mastery 2.0 come out?
Roughly St. Never's Day.
I actually gave him the preview of what he needs to handle to write it.
And the answer, what do I need to handle to write it? The answer to that seems to be drugs. A lot of drugs. Ah,
So I see one of your books is about Ed. Is there anything you can tell me about Ed, since I don't know hardly anything about it? That
well,
what's
Ed is the standard editor. It's one of those, you must be this tall to use this computer thing. And since you brought it up, let me see here.
I think we were frozen there for a minute.
Oh, sorry. I'm looking and I don't see a copy handy. So, oh wait.
John, could you repeat your question?
I have many times gotten quotes for a book. Like I think I got Bob to give me a quote for an OpenBSD book and what have you. But this is oh, it's backwards. Dang it. Okay, get a mirror.
Oh, it's right.
You can see that is a quote from Ken Thompson, co-creator of Unix, on the back of the Ed book. Now Ed is if you work on real hardware, particularly, Ed is vital. Because if everything else fails, you still have Ed.
You're speaking of the editor, Ed, correct?
The editor, Ed.
Unfortunately, that's not true anymore. There's some distributions that are deigning to not include Ed.
Well, then they're not Unix.
Oh,
it's that simple. Boom, done.
Unix,
no.
They're not Unix according to Michael Lucas. Okay.
No.
Simple Venn diagram of free and open source systems that use the asterisk NIX, and Ed must be included.
Yep.
Actually, it's not according to Michael Lucas. It's according to a standard called POSIX,
I don't care
Which-
about POSIX.
which
Most people don't.
most Linux distributions don't actually follow.
Yep. So, yeah, but that's another whole argument best had in a bar where we can actually start to throw drinks and disturb the neighbors. But yes, Ed is understanding Ed will teach you about why Unix is the way it is.
It will also, if I follow your book, because I've read it and tried many of the exercises in it, it will explain to you why you don't understand regular expressions and never will.
Well,
Now
yes.
I'm perplexed. I've not read.
It will also make you a better VI user.
See, regexes and VI and VIM are my jam. So
It will also, if you've ever wanted a scriptable VI, that's Ed.
do you go into the statement you just made on Linux and contemporary BSDs? Much of the same thing could be done with SED, the streaming editor.
Often, yes. Unix has so many ways to solve that problem. And the truth is, I would use Perl. But if you need, I've worked on systems where it would literally take an act of Congress to add a piece of software to them. And one of the glories of Unix is that the tools are there. You may not know how to use them. You may not know why say the left bracket is a shell command, not built into the shell. It's like /bin/left bracket. Why is that a command? Well, because you can use it. And you go through and look at, you probably don't want to do this on a Linux system, but a more classical Unix that has a distinction between like user bin and user local bin, the core system versus add-ons. And you see 20 or 30 programs in /bin or /sbin that are considered the core. Go study each of those programs separately, and you will realize that this is a powerful operating system without Python, without Perl. You can do a huge amount with it. So, yeah.
Was that the regular version of Ed Mastery or the Manly McMahon face?
Oh, this is the regular version. If you are willing to pay me an extra $20 to not be exposed to feminine pronouns, you don't get a Ken Thompson quote. You don't rate that.
So if I read the SSH Mastery book, will I learn why there's this weird green thing on the front of it?
Yes. OpenSSH is done by the OpenBSD people. And that is their blowfish as the Mona Lisa.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, OpenSSH is pure OpenBSD. It may be the most widely installed Linux program on a Linux system, but no, that's OpenBSD.
I wonder if it rivals Java for the most installed thing.
Java? Well, it might. And for the record, I would like to say that monocultures are bad. Please compete with OpenSSH. It's not as bad as it used to be, but we need some diversity and interoperability there.
Would
some
you
of
defend the interoperability part there?
I'm sorry?
Would you defend the need some interoperability there? Because I'm taking that as of something with OpenSSH that is not as interoperable as you would like.
I am not aware of anything at this time.
Okay.
When you point out incompatibilities, they jump on the OpenSSH people jump on them like starving dogs on raw meat. But one of the reasons that things like NFS have stayed around for so long is because of events like Interop, where every vendor got together and they tested their NFSs against each other to make sure it all still worked. Someday, somebody will figure out something that attacks OpenSSH, and it would be nice to have an alternative. While OpenSSH figures it out, it would be nice if 90% of the servers on the internet weren't running the same SSH daemon, please.
People have found problems with SSH daemons all the time.
Yeah.
They just tend to not be OpenSSH. They tend to be the other implementations.
Or
Yes.
old versions.
So there are actually a number of other SSH implementations out there. The reason they're not popular is they just tend to have problems.
They want money for it.
Yeah.
I guess I'm the writer, so I'll use my vocabulary here. They tend to suck.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love a better one. I'm going to move this camera now that I'm talking. Okay.
This is Gary, by the way, and I want to apologize. One of our attendees here, Sam, I believe it was, pointed out that in Meetup, at one time, the day of this meeting was incorrect. And so I apologize to Sam and anyone else who was confused by that. I think we caught it the day that incorrect date went out there. But as one of our members who is here in the meeting says...
Gary, be honest, Meetup sucks.
Okay, good. I didn't have to...
I'm a positive influence on the group. Excellent.
So anyway, I apologize that we didn't catch that mistake more quickly, and hopefully it didn't badly affect anyone else. So I do have a question here. Obviously, Michael, you've been involved in many different aspects of sysadmin, and I've kind of found that the area of networking is kind of special within sysadmining. I mean, there are some guys who are very good sysadmins until they get to networking, and they absolutely hate networking, or some of them think they love networking, but obviously they don't quite have a grasp on networking. Do you have a feel, a description better than I on that? How do you describe those people?
Well, What I would tell those people is to go to their nearest bookstore and grab a copy of Networking for Systems Administrators by Michael Lucas. That it's written for exactly those people, and the ebook is $10. Here's the thing. A network administrator cannot be a sysadmin. You have people who dabble in both, like me, but I'm insane.
And
Generally,
if you get to the point where you need to dabble in the network administrator, then you buy the Michael Lucas book, also by Michael Lucas, which is called Cisco Routers for the Desperate. It is actually the Michael Lucas technical book that I use the most.
oh, I'm so sorry. Here's the thing. There are two different jobs, or two different mindsets. I mean, a sysadmin cannot understand how a network administrator doesn't have logs. I mean, how do you operate a network without that? How do you work a computer without that? Meanwhile, from the network admin's point of view, there's a culture in system administration that says, blame the network. It didn't work. Well, it had to be the network. I don't know. And basically, the place where they intersect is the network stack. If you can take it as a network administrator, oh, and yes, the firewall, there's always the firewall.
Unless it's DNS.
As a network administrator, I would get two kinds of calls. One, what's wrong with the network? And my answer to that call is almost always nothing. The other kind of call I would get is, hey, I have a client that's trying to reach my server on port 443, and TCP dump shows the packets are not arriving. That second call, I will pick up immediately, because the person who says that is an entirely different category of sysadmin than the person who just wants to know what's wrong with the network. That second person I can work with, I can resolve a problem, and it will be fast. Or at least identification will be fast. Filing the change request with the firewall administrator is a whole separate thing. But, we can identify what's happening. We can work together. 3 minutes, done. And yeah, that is why I wrote this book. Because the network equipment is fluid, servers are fluid, just keeping up on what you're doing is a full-time job. But TCP/IP is pretty stable. Yes, you've had to update your skills for IPv6. That's been the major change in decades. The sysadmin does not need to know window scaling. They don't need to know the difference between beckon and feckin. But if they can have a conversation about ports and say, hey, I don't have a link light. Well, hey, I can work with that. So yeah, I would tell all sysadmins, of all the books I've written, this is the one that I've heard from more network administrators than any other book. And most of them have said, thank you for that book. I have slapped so many sysadmins with it. Because learning that really will help you. So, anything else?
Again, Michael, I gotta say for sure that I've had a bang up time this evening. It's been great talking to you, great listening to you. I'm gonna have to run out and get some of the books I missed.
Is this when I put a link to my bookstore in the chat?
Sure. Please do.
I mean, at $10 a piece, at least we know you're making most of the profit.
Yeah,
Well,
the
his publishing
bookstore.
company and distributor scalp him.
Well, I don't have my books in a bookstore unless they cut me a fair deal. Which is why the new OpenBSD file systems book is not on Amazon.
Yeah, so sometimes I wonder how small companies like ours can afford to sell on Amazon with all the different ways they come up with to ding you.
Yep. I have a blog post, which I'm not going to dig up. But there's my website. You can poke around.
Okay.
I have an RSS feed. I post 1 minute of a work in progress every week. So if you want to know what I'm working on, that's the easiest way.
Who's
This week it was baseball.
Yeah, it's been mail server for a few weeks, but today it was orc baseball.
And I'm looking forward to that story, sir.
Ah, well, thank you. Were you on the orc Kickstarter?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then you get it.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for backing book.
I gotta go.
Yeah, and it may be 8:45 there, but it's 9:45 here.
All right.
So,
Michael, from everyone, I know a few people have already dropped off and given you thanks there in the chat. But from all of us, thank you very, very much. As Lee said, it's wonderful to actually have a face and a voice to put with the books from all these years. And it's really been a great, enlightening evening. We really, really appreciate it. Hopefully we can get you to come back sometime. So
you can. Just ask. This was fun.
Before you disappear, put where people can follow you, because you actually answer questions on social media. I don't know why, especially my questions.
There is my Mastodon handle. I am no longer on Twitter because Elon Musk is an alt-right dipshit. Facebook is useless to a small business like mine. So that's the best way to get me.
Fantastic.
So I had fun talking with you. Thank you for the
you.
invite and listening to me babble on about one of the horrible things in computing.
And thank you to everyone in the congregation and the audience, the group here. We've loved having you all tonight. And of course, we've got our Discuss mailing list. A lot of the post-meeting conversations go on there. And you're always welcome, any of you, to come to any of our meetings here in the future. And Stan's got his finger up.
But at least we not forget Jonathan Drews did the invite to Michael Lucas, and we really appreciate what Jonathan did for us, because you are a wonderful speaker for our group, and this has been one of the best presentations I've seen in a long time. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's nice to hear.
I second the
I
motion.
don't want to come back every month, But if there's another topic I did a book on and you'd like me to talk about it, drop me a note. I could come by 2-3 times a year easy.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And certainly if there's ever anything that just suddenly pops in your mind and you say, dang, I need to talk to somebody about this on Zoom tonight, this week, just let us know.
Okay, will do.
All right.
Y'all have a good night.
Thank you, Michael.
Have a good one.
Bye now.
And the rest of you, we can leave the chat room open for a bit. And for those who don't feel the immediate need to
Bug out.
You're welcome to just swap war stories or ask each other, just what odd thing you've seen online today or various software questions. And so yeah, we can accommodate that for a while longer here if anybody just wants to chit chat.
Life beckons. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Grant.
Question, Lee, should we
Yeah,
stop
just-
the recording?
Gary, you want to do a bookend and we can.
And a bookend for our recording. This has been the St. Louis LUG, the St. Louis Linux User Group meeting on Thursday, November the 16th, 2023. Our speaker this evening was Michael Lucas. It was about his book on transport layer security to 2023, TLS 2023. And it's one of our 4 monthly meetings, and next week is Thanksgiving. So thank you and good night on the recording.